Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking about reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3, and in this particular video I really want to talk about managing and coming up with different examples of sharing economy companies. This is part of my startup and small business strategy Saturday series I put out, and I've been doing a lot of, so I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about the sharing economy, particularly about for the Reciprocity Project, but also, I'm a researcher, so I focus on this kind of stuff, and it's part of the reason why I'm actually doing the Reciprocity Project is I'm trying to figure out what is this thing, trying to use it as a way to sort of jump into understanding the sharing economy. And I think I'm getting a little bit better of a grasp on what the sharing economy is, at least from the academic side, in terms of looking at it from a bigger picture. And I thought it would be just interesting to have a sort of small chit chat of exactly what that is. I've read a lot of articles recently. One of them that's really good that's coming out in the Journal of Marketing by Perren and Kozinets, and you can take a look at the references in the show notes if you want to look at that. They have a great sort of understanding, a framework of what exactly the sharing economy is, and I think my overlapping ideas are very similar to what they are looking at. The first thing is that there is some sort of software platform mediation, intermediation that happens that connects two individuals to whether they are peers. The sort of peer element is kind of murky because it's not necessarily the peers. They could be professionals. They could be somebody that's really advanced, but it's connecting two different individuals or multiple individuals and putting them together through some sort of software intermediation. I think that's really the distinctive feature about the sharing economy. It's not a lot different from what we normally have thought about the traditional economy. If you think about the way that the traditional economy works, is that you do have exchange that happens and that there's person A, the buyer, and the seller, and they meet together. And the way that normally works is in the real economy is that there is, the buyer and the seller, and they meet together really effectively. It's kind of in sort of tribes and things like that. It's really the norm that they would sort of do an exchange that way. It's only sort of a recent phenomenon where we have what's called the price vector, which is just a price on the particular goods and services that are being sold. Like when you go to the grocery store, that's kind of that's a recent phenomenon where you have a fixed price and everybody understands it as a fixed price. But the most transactions, most things are based on who and having sort of access to different people, and that's really what the sharing economy does. But it does so in an amplified way. The software sort of mimics and replicates some of these sort of features in the real world about they were coining it sort of consociality, and it's really just about like things related to being human and sort of being related to individuals and being that we like to actually be part of and around other individuals and stuff. And I'm kind of sort of cognizant of that as well. So that's really what the sharing economy is. It's sort of connecting multiple actors together through some sort of software platform, and doing so that it sort of amplifies the existing exchange of resources that we currently do in the real world. Now, they have kind of a framework to understand that, where they're talking about different things like forums, for example. That would be an example would be like Craigslist, for example, where it's kind of much more less that there's any sort of intermediation that's going on by the platform. And they were talking about things like Matchmakers, for example, or platforms that do matchmakers. That's kind of like a hub. It's kind of like what Reciprocity, or that's kind of like Uber, for example, or Airbnb. It's kind of similar in that way. That's what I'm trying to actually do with Reciprocity. There's other things like enablers and hubs as well, which are less on the sense of being interconnected, I guess, and being just on lesser degrees, I guess, of the scale of those two dimensions. Now, there are, different key aspects with the sharing economy that I've been looking at, and they didn't actually touch on this as nearly as much because I think it's a marketing journal that they're looking at, so they're focused on consumers, but there is a huge literature on both the sort of management side and technology side that's looking at these sort of factors and stuff, and they're kind of interplaying and connecting together. The first one is sort of focus on the long tail. These software intermediaries can focus on the long tail that connect people that are in weird locations and sort of wouldn't normally meet together, but they connect online. And they do so in a sort of effective manner, and the algorithms sort of match them up in an effective manner, right? That is kind of the way that's a key difference with the sharing economy. The second one that I think is important is that there's a blurring of boundaries between how we think about buyers and sellers, and we can connect them in different ways that we normally wouldn't sort of connect them in different ways. It's really easy to sort of turn on and become a buyer, for example, in Uber, where you buy the services, but then you can go that night and go into your own car and then sell the services. It's much more easier. It's much more rapid. It's kind of much more like what's called a spot market, where there is sort of at the instantaneous moment where you it's much more on demand, right? So the price is sort of evaluated much more on demand. It's sort of commoditized thing that you're looking at. And the third thing that is important, and this is related to this sort of being connected to other people sort of element of it, is that there is a high degree of trust and reciprocity that's connected with being on the sharing economy platform. So it's a key difference. If you look at some of the older videos in terms of getting Uber off the ground or Airbnb off the ground, that was a key thing, is sort of building that trust between people, and it's really doing so in a really effective manner. And a lot of that's done through algorithms and design features on the different platforms to allow that to happen. Having and this relates to the sort of fourth thing, is having sort of quality control mechanisms like ratings, right? Having these sort of simple ratings, as well as having payment schemes that are really trustworthy, like things like Stripe, for example, or PayPal, that people are really sort of understanding how those things work and how they connect together in a really effective manner. Those are really, really key, I think. And then the fifth one that doesn't get mentioned nearly as much, and I think it's really key in terms of the success of most sort of sharing economy platforms, why they sort of take off and don't take off. What I've learned actually with with the Reciprocity project is that the content production, the content creation is so key in order to actually get things going in terms of getting the sort of brand out there, in terms of other people getting sort of used to using that in that content creation. It's really hard to get that started, particularly with different sort of platforms like a forum, for example, to get people to join on and start intermingling, I guess, and communicating with each other, where you have peer content production or sort of collaborative consumption, right? So where people sort of post things on Wikipedia, for example, is really hard to get started, and it takes a long time to get that started. And it just requires putting out a tremendous amount of content over and over and over and over and over again that a lot of people sort of don't think about, and that is key to actually producing a strong sharing economy platform, is for moving that forward. I think if I was to do this over again, that would be the number one thing, is to continuously keep producing content, and to do that before I did any sort of investment on anything, to show that there is effort and people are actually starting to participate in sort of that particular idea. It's really hard to get that going. First of all, because of the search engines, you have to get the search engine algorithms sort of picking up on that kind of stuff. And then second of all, people have to build trust. And those two things are really related to content production, and knowing that this particular person on the other side is not some scary individual that's going to that's not going to take your money or not going to harm you in any sort of way. So those are key things that you should worry about with your startup and small business. If you're trying to create anything particular company like this, is the key way to think about startup and strategy. Is from what I understand and what I've done so far, if you were to do this and to think about it, just think about those particular key aspects and building those into your particular platform, right? Whatever you're building or whatever sort of online service that you're providing, make sure you're focusing on getting to the long tail, focusing on the long tail, thinking about sort of how boundaries might be blurred in some sort of way, and sort of reducing that, because it actually requires a lot of cognitive load to think about these sort of blurred boundaries. It's really hard for people to think about that. There's advantages to it, and I can get into that but I'm not going to get into that in this particular video. But the other thing is to think about how to build trust and figure sort of quality control mechanisms are really important. And then finally thinking about content production, however that might be, and thinking about whether you're going to produce it yourself and do content production yourself. I think like Airbnb does a little bit of that, for example. But then, think about sort of how Airbnb actually gets people to actually produce content on there and do lots of it, right? Or Facebook, for example, to do a lot of this content production. That is amazing that people are actually doing this. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that people are actually going onto Facebook and actually producing content for them and enjoying that particular experience. It's a weird thing if you think about it, because they're taking money and resources from another thing and putting it onto this particular platform. So that's it. If you like this video, make sure you do an old thumbs up as well. Just watch a couple of the other videos. Take care and have a good day. Bye.